Thank you for joining us today on Dead Headspace, where you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Pandora, Spotify, Stitch, and many, many more platforms. I am your host, Patrick R. McDonough, and this is my co host, Brennan LaFaro.
Hello.
We are joined today by Philip Fracassi. Please tell me if I said your last name correctly.
Yes,
And
correct.
So Philip, we got a lot to dive into, but I think the most pressing thing we should discuss right now, since this is going to come out a week after we're recording it, and I'm sure it's still going to be a pretty hot topic for many reasons, is the GoFundMe you started, Horror Writers for Black Lives Matter. If you take that in any direction that you want.
Yeah, the fundraiser was, um, man, it was not. It was really just a whim. I was frustrated, as most Americans were and are, and I didn't feel like I was doing enough. My wife and I donated to some places, and her company matched our donations, which was very generous. Um, and and there's the protest and the marching and that kind of stuff, which is all great. It's amazing, and but I just didn't feel like I was doing enough, and so I just kind of said, in the HWA, the Horror Writers Association, they hadn't really, they made a statement, but again, they weren't really doing anything, and so I just said, well, you know what? I know a lot of horror writers. A lot of writers, a lot of these guys are my friends. A lot of the reviewers I know very well. I have a decent following on social media. I got a few thousand Facebook friends. I got a couple thousand Twitter followers, and about 1,000 people on Instagram and stuff. So I figured, maybe I just put together a quick GoFundMe, um, and try and get horror writers and people associated with horror, um, to help me kind of raise a little bit of money. And I had heard about the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, um, through a couple of celebrities actually that had posted a lot of given them a lot of money, and so I did some research on them, and I really liked what I read. Their founder, Sherlyn Eiffel, seems really smart. I like that they were into educating people as well as um, helping, underrepresented people of color represent themselves, for legal and whether it be for police brutality or false arrest or any sort of civil rights issue. They came in and they protected those people. So I really researched it, and I really liked what they were doing. And so yeah, so whatever. So I launched the fund. I posted it on Facebook. I posted it on Twitter. I probably emailed or messaged maybe 20 people that I knew had reach, that I knew would be behind something like this. Everyone from Laird Barron to Josh Mallerman to Paul Tremblay, just guys and girls who I know in the space who I knew would be like, yeah, I'll retweet it, or I'll give you a signal boost. Brian Keene was amazing. And then reviewers like Shane Keene and Sadie Hartman, also known as Mother Horror, they really went to town on it. So it just kind of blew up. I guess the kids call it went viral or whatever. And I'd put $1,000 GoFundMe target on that fund, and we blew past that in about an hour. And then we were at 20, and I changed it to 2,500, and we were through that in about the next 5 minutes. So I doubled it to 5,000, and we hit that before the end of the day. And now it's at, we're about a week or so later, week and a half maybe after the fact, and we're at something like $24,000 that was raised for the legal defense fund. So I'm really proud of the community, and I'm really happy that people got behind it. And it's, I just hope it does some good. That's all I can hope for. The fight for human rights is an important one, and everyone needs to be represented equally and treated equally, and that's something that's very, very important to me. And so I'm glad that it took off.
That's great. Yeah, with me and Brendan and everyone at our review platform that had reviews is we're fully supportive of that. We're glad that someone that actually has the knowledge and the legalities and which cause is the right cause to go to actually created that. So hats off to you for that. And for anyone that's listening that is not aware of maybe where to go, where can they go? And I will post this in the episode notes just so they can see the actual link.
Right. Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Yeah, the easiest thing is probably just to go to the GoFundMe website and search horror writers for Black Lives Matter, and it'll come up in a search. Or you can go to my Twitter feed. I have it pinned to my Twitter. I have it pinned to my Instagram. But the best thing is probably just to go to GoFundMe.com and search horror writers for Black Lives Matter, and you'll see it there. I'm going to leave it up. I've had a couple interview requests from some podcasters that are maybe going to be doing stuff later in the month or in early July. So I'm going to leave it up for a while. Probably, there's really no reason to take it down. It's unlike when you raise money for yourself where you're like, okay, I've reached my goal. I can go publish my book or whatever. It's really just an open fund, right? So the more people that donate, the better. There's all the money. There's no all the money. Every penny goes straight to the Legal Defense Fund because they are a vetted charity through GoFundMe. So there's no fees taken out. There's no commission taken out. It's not going to me and then going to the charity. Every penny goes directly to the charity. So unlike, I don't have to turn it off in order to get that money sent through. It just goes as it comes in. So yeah, so I'll probably just leave it up. Unless there's a good reason to take it down. I would love to see it get $25,000 in the next week or so. And then, who knows, maybe if I can get somebody to share it or promote it on a larger platform, we can keep it going. But as long as people are, donating and to whatever charity they feel comfortable with, whatever charity they're familiar with, that's the important thing. This is just something, like you said, a lot of horror writers and a lot of people in the horror writing community didn't really know where to go with their frustration and their anger or their money. And so I kind of felt like I created a little bit of a landing pad for a lot of people who were like, great, perfect. This is great. I'm going to give $20 here. I'm going to give $5 here. Or I'm going to give $100 here. And that made it, and that, kind of allowed them to have a place to vent that need to want to help.
That's so very true. And I love hearing that you really just did your legwork, your research. I know one of the things that I was running into, running in circles, looking around for a place or multiple places, and that's just what you provided. Is like, look, I've done the research. This is a good place for money to go, and the way I've set it up, they're not going to take any fees out of it or anything like that. It's gold. Now, I know you had said that, you initially made it for 1,000 and that got knocked out in an hour. Obviously, you were surprised that happened in an hour. Were you surprised it happened in general? Did you set that goal thinking that you'd be lucky to get just that?
Yeah, I was surprised to get it in general. My honest to God thinking was I could raise a few $100. That was what I was on. When I posted it. I posted it on my social media platforms, like I said, and I thought, oh, maybe we'll raise $200 or $300, $400, I was like, I'll put the goal at 1,000 just so we can have something to shoot for. And it blew up. I mean, I think, like I said, I think and then it got Brian Keene, once he retweeted it. Yeah, I think I said that right. Then there was definitely a larger groundswell. I think a lot of his followers are pretty passionate, and he was a huge proponent of it. He even mentioned me on his podcast, mentioned the fund on his podcast, last episodes. That was great. Josh Mallerman donated books that we gave away for people who donated. Almakatsu donated books. So there were a lot of people kind of jumping in different ways, and if you can see, people were messaging me and saying, hey, I saw that Josh was giving away books. I'll send you some books, and I'll send you some books as well. And I was like, whoa. just post it on your own social media, say you're giving them away. I kind of wanted to step back a little bit, because I was kind of like, this is like everyone's thing. We do not need to use me as a conduit. I don't mind the work. I mean, I'm happy to do it for a good cause, but just put it just pop it up there, just take it and run with it. So a lot of people started doing that. And since then it's been still progressing. Like I said, we're at 24, I think just under $24,000. But actually I can tell you exactly, $23,595 as of today, which is June 16th. So pretty good. I mean, the community really, really came out. Oh, and I should also mention that HWA also shared it, and that was a huge boost as well, because a lot of people who are HWA members came through. Lovecraft D-Zine shared it. Strange Eons magazine shared it. Nightworms shared it. Inkheist shared it. I mean, it was everybody just kind of came together and blasted it, and it was like a trumpet, just kind of bellowing across the land, and all the different tribes came running, to help. So it was for those fantasy lovers out there, as an analogy for it. So it was cool, and I'm just happy. I didn't do much. I threw it up there. I sent a couple emails. Oh, like the one thing that was very cool was I was trying to get a kind of a resurgence of it, and I sent an email to Mike Flanagan, who recently directed Dr. Sleep and Haunting of Hill House and a bunch of other stuff like that. And he graciously donated and tweeted it on his platforms as well. So that was very cool of Mike Flanagan. So go buy his movie, because he's a good guy.
I have to say that in part, obviously that's a huge number. I think you said 23,595.
Yeah.
But also in a way, I'm not super shocked. Just it reminds me of when the whole quarantine thing hit, and we just saw horror authors coming out of the woodwork, giving away stuff for free. Philip, I think you gave away one for free, didn't you?
Yeah, I gave away a couple. I offered a novella in the month of April, and a different novella in the month of May or March. I always get my M's confused. Whenever the quarantine hit, yeah, I offered a couple of novellas. I put them into a ebook format, and I put them up online for free. Yeah, so people could have something to read while they were stuck at home.
Yeah, I know my Kindle's still recovering from all the stuff I downloaded in that period. But the point is, I feel like everybody came out and said, I want to help. I want to do something to support the mental health of this community. I'm at a loss constantly for what a giving community it is. So again, in a way, I'm not super shocked.
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the I write for a website called Book and Film Globe. I write like book reviews, and I do interviews and stuff. I did like a upcoming list of horror books for 2020, stuff like that, and the editor is a author named Neil Pollack, who's been around for a while. And he made the comment to me once when I posted something about, I think it was that best of 2020 or upcoming books in 2020 that you should read. And the response was so huge. And he said, I work with a lot of different genres. I work with, he's like I said, he's been around, and I've worked with, literary writers, and I work with YA writers, and I work with sci-fi writers, and as an editor. And he said, but I've never seen the kind of response or the kind of community vibe that you get with horror writers. Like, because YA writers can tend to be really snippy with each other, and they're very competitive, and science fiction has their own cliques and all that kind of stuff. And and literary writers can be kind of difficult because they're a little uppity maybe and kind of follow as it were, not to be and he's like, yeah, but horror writers, man, you guys are just like a strong, there's definitely a strong community feel. And I really appreciated him saying that. So I agree with you 100%. And I think we have our problems like anybody. And I think, sometimes I think as a community, we can be a little overzealous to condemn and judge. Um, and that's a negative, but I think the positives are that, they're very passionate. They come together when there's a need. You've probably seen fundraisers. Speaking of Brian Keene, like when Brian Keene burned himself badly, there's a fundraiser, and a lot of people contributed. When another horror writer's kid needed to go to school, and they needed money for something, there was a lot of people contributed. So I do feel like it's a great community. I'm very proud and of the horror community, and it feels good to be part of it for sure.
Do you have any thoughts or speculation on why horror works that way, but maybe the some of the other genres might have more like nitpicky problems?
I think it's just if I was just to speculate, I think it's probably it's personality based. I think I think the culture of horror writers tends to be pretty down to earth. Like everyone seems to be pretty, we're kind of gamers slash, kind of that gaming community, but without the snide element of it. But no, I think I think the passion of horror is it's kind of, in a way it's kind of a niche, that, when you're into the dark stuff, you're kind of part of, a lot of other people that are into that sort of stuff. And I think that when you're into, I think that the darkness of horror attracts people who maybe are better at seeing the light than others because we've seen so much of the dark, or because we can see the dark so clearly. I also think that horror writers tend to be a fairly sensitive bunch. When I mean by sensitive, I don't mean defensive. I mean sensitive to issues and sensitive to things that go on in the world, and sensitive to feelings and in a way, a lot of horror writers are outliers. So I think when we come together, it's sort of seeing someone who you feel a certain kinship to. Hey man, if you're at a business meeting or a business lunch and you mention that you're a horror writer, count how many weird looks you get, right? And but when you go to a horror convention or whatever, and you're surrounded by people who don't look at you weird, who look at you with eager eyes, wanting to know, tell me more. I think that's a really strong feeling.
We're I think it's safe to say we're the misfit group that I don't understand why. For me, I feel like horror probably back to when we were able to communicate. What stories did you tell? I'm sure it wasn't, hey, this person fell in love with that person. You're going to talk about like shit that scares people, things to stay away from. Maybe not ghost stories per se. I don't know what they call it back then, but I know that Bigfoot, Gigantopithecus, that's probably where Bigfoot came from stories of this real giant ape that, stay away from or it might kill you.
Yeah.
I just don't understand why I consider us the misfits of genre. And I wear that with honor because, like you were saying, to piggyback off your point, basically we unveil our everything. The best writers in horror bleed on the page, and they just reveal who they are. That takes courage. That's a brave act, in my opinion. And there's a lot of reception that's like, I understand. I get it. And I feel better. It's therapeutic.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, look, a lot of horror is steeped in mythology, right? It's steeped in the old, and all the old rumors and all the old stories, that have been come down from, thousands of years. So I think a lot of the horror is rooted in that kind of mysticism or mythology or folklore. And I think that's a huge reason why, people who gravitate toward that, are definitely looking to tie into something ancient and and long standing. So it can feel, powerful to talk about that kind of thing and to continue to express those sort of like early fears and early horrors that ultimately tie to who we are as humans and to our society. And I think nowadays people, maybe there's more of a focus on sociological horror, where people are talking a little bit more about the horrors of the real world and that we live in today, and maybe less about the monsters of old. But hopefully we'll continue to do both. But I think it's interesting that we can address, use what we've learned to address modern horrors of civil unrest and inequality and things like that. So that's kind of, I think, where I'm at with maybe saying we're probably sensitive, is that I think we're sensitive to the present woes of humanity because we are so steeped in the past woes of humanity. So I think it gives us something to use as a base for all the things that are happening in our world now. It's, we know how scary it is, and we're not afraid to write about it, and hopefully get other people thinking about it.
For sure. And just one thing about how I don't know how you two are, but when people ask at work, people know what I do now. They know I write horror, but at first, I mean, like I bring a book with me everywhere I go, so people see what I write. Sometimes it's a weird cover, but when I was a juror last time, they asked like, "What do you do for fun?" I'm not gonna lie, so I just say, basically, I write and read. What do you write and read? Horror mainly. And right there in my head, I'm like, they're not gonna pick me. I'm a juror to decide if someone's going to be charged an X amount of money. I'm not going to get picked because I'm a freak.
Yeah.
That's how in my mind I perceive how other people perceive me. Do you guys feel that way ever?
Well, yeah, like I was saying, like I've been at those tables where people are like, what do you do when you're not, because my day job is I work in film and TV as a location manager. So, when I'm on a set, or I'm, at a lunch with a bunch of crew members or whatever, they'll say like, what what else do you do when you're not working? I say, oh, I'm a horror writer. And I get that look, that like, you must be, well, the first look I get is that, it's more of a kind of almost like a tinge of disgust, where they just kind of like, where they feel like you told them that you don't bathe very often. And then that kind of, maybe turns a little bit into like, well, I definitely don't respect you, but I think I can kind of see how that might be interesting, but I'm dismissing it as a whole. It's, it's too bad. I've read a lot of, like posts and blog posts and social media posts from writers who've encountered that kind of reaction, and it kind of bums me out. I think a lot of people are like, well, I write supernatural thrillers, is kind of what I've started to say to people, admittedly, because I was sick of getting those looks, and supernatural thrillers don't go a whole lot longer, but at least I don't get the disgust looks quite as much. They're, but so it's definitely tricky. The other thing you do is you can tell me you're a horror screenwriter, and they might appreciate that more because that's something they can understand. Everyone likes a horror movie,
That's true. Even bad ones.
Right.
What's that one with tomatoes? Attack of the Killer Tomatoes.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, that's still like people will still watch that shit.
Yeah.
Now, I'm really interested because I've been studying up on you, man, for the last few days since you said yes that you'd want to be on the show. The only way I can ask this is what got you into horror, which is what we ask all our guests, but I'm specifically curious about you because you have so many avenues that aren't related to horror. So I'd love to see where this goes.
Well, I've always been a horror reader. Like most people, I, was raised on Stephen King and Dean Koontz and Clive Barker, and like most people, I went through phases where I stopped reading genre stuff and I read, maybe more literary stuff or or whatever. But I always came back to it, and I've always been a writer. So I've written 3 novels. Well, I shouldn't say that. I originally wrote in my 30s. I wrote like 3 novels, all of which are literary, character-driven fiction. They're not genre. They're not horror, and I didn't really do anything with them. And then um, in the early, probably right around 2010, I had a bookstore for a while. My bookstore went out of business, and I started writing screenplays full time. And I sold a couple screenplays, and one of them was a Disney movie. One of them was a Lifetime movie. Um, and then, so I did that for a while, and I made okay money doing that. Um, but I was still kind of frustrated. I wasn't getting anywhere. So one day I was just walking around the block, and it kind of hit me. It was sort of this epiphany, um, where I was like, why the hell aren't I writing horror fiction? Like, I love horror. I'm already writing horror screenplays. Um, I don't know why I don't try my hand at actually doing fiction. And this was like 2015, so only about 5 years ago. And so I wrote a story. It was the first genre story I've ever written. It was called Mother. At the time, it was actually called Cocoon, but it ended up being called Mother. And I had, interestingly, I had sort of befriended Laird Barron because I actually tried to option one of his short stories for a screenplay that I wanted to write. And so I was talking to him. I was talking to his agent. Ended up not doing it. I couldn't afford it, frankly. But he and I kind of became, friendly. And so when I wrote the story, I said, I messaged him and I said, hey man, I wrote this story. I've never written a genre story before. Would you consider reading it and giving me feedback? And he said, yeah, of course. So I sent it to him. And a few weeks later, he messaged me and he said, hey, can you hop on a phone call? And I was like, yeah, I can hop on a phone call with Laird Barron. I'd read Paul's book to talk about my story. Sure, why not? And he called me and we spoke for about an hour and a half or so. And I still have all the notes from that conversation. But basically, it opened with like, you can do this. This is a great story, and it has flashes of genius, and it's very saleable, and you can do this. And we talked a lot about what he thought would make the story better. We talked a lot about what he thought I could do better as a writer, and he and I have had those conversations ad nauseum since then. We're very close friends, and he's probably the only person in the world who's read everything I've written, including the stuff not published, and so I rewrote the story. And I sent it to Jordan Krall at Dynatox Ministries, and he wrote me back and said, "Yeah, I love it. I'd love to publish it as a chapbook." And this is Dunham's Manor was the name of the press that Dynatox was over, and Mother came out in 2015, and it did, and I got Paul Tremblay to blurb it, I got Adam Neville to blurb it, I got Laird Barron to blurb it. Paul and Laird are on the front cover of that chapbook, and it kind of went from there. And then I wrote another story called Altar. I sent that story to Jordan. He also published that story. That was February 2016, I think. And that one really took off, and a lot of people read it, and it got a lot of press, and it got a lot of reviews, and my career snowballed from there. By the end of that year, I had to deal with Journal Stone to publish my debut collection. They also published a couple novellas, and I've just been writing ever since, and that was it. And so it's been a great 5 years so far, and I've got an agent, and I've got a book out, and I've got about 20 stories out there on the market, and I'm kind of focusing now more on novels, and hoping to break through on that side of things. But yeah, I feel really fortunate so far, and it's been a lot of fun, and I've enjoyed the community, and I've enjoyed learning about the genre, and I really love the writing. I really love the process of writing this kind of scary, creepy, terrible stuff. So I hope I get to keep doing it for a long time.
I hope
So
you do too.
yeah, most definitely. Speaking of process, how did you find the process of approaching Mother differed from screenwriting?
It was definitely very different. And like I said, I've always been a writer. So, I'd written a ton of short stories. I'd written, like I said, 3 novels up to, before 2015, I'd written three novels. And so I was very familiar with process, but I don't want to say I wasn't very good at it, but I never felt really, the confidence was never where I really needed it to be. And screenwriting is a more gaugeable sense of success, because if you sell a screenplay, you're successful. And so, having sold a couple screenplays and having a couple screenplays produced, I was feeling pretty confident about building a career in that front. But when I decided to write Mother, I did have to approach it differently than you do a screenplay in some ways. But in some ways, I used a lot of the things that I learned about telling a story in constructing the story of Mother. So screenwriting is incredibly technical. It's very, yes, it's creative, but not like prose writing is creative. It's very technical in that there are certain beats you have to hit at certain times of the story. There's a certain structure that you have to follow, and a lot of prose writers hate screenwriting because they get into it and they realize exactly how technical and constraining it can be, and they scream and tear their clothes and pull their hair because it's not they can't be as artistic as they want to be or whatever, or they feel their art's being somehow contained or whatever. But that's what screenwriting is. It's a job, and basically you're taking an idea and you're creating a platform for all these other people to build on top of it. The director and the production designer and the effects crew and the actors. It's not yours. It's not your story to tell. It's everybody's story to tell. You're just kind of the guy, creating the blueprint. So it's much different. But taking that structure and applying it to stories really gave me a leg up, because I could. I knew how to tell a story that had a beginning, a middle, and an end. I knew how to construct a story, so that it had a satisfying pace and flow, and so that really helped me a lot. And with Mother, I didn't get into necessarily laying it out, or anything like that, outlining it in the way I would have a screenplay. But I definitely had those things in my head when I was writing it. And I think if there's a negative to that, is that when you are a screenwriter and you write prose, sometimes you have, sometimes you tend to think of the story the way you tend to visualize what you're writing the way you visualize a screenplay, and that can get you in a little bit of trouble sometimes. You don't necessarily want to keep cutting back and forth as much as you do in a movie, when you're writing prose, for one example. But if you take a story like that I wrote called Mandala, which is in my first collection, that's basically that's a movie in story form. It reads like a movie. It's written to read like a movie, and it's a really popular story because I think people get really excited while reading it. So different approaches, but there's a lot of crossover between lessons I've learned in one place and the lessons I've learned in the other. Adversely, when you're writing a screenplay and you're a writer, you have to be very careful about overwriting a screenplay. They don't want the description. They don't want to, they don't want the flowery language. They want action and dialogue. So that's something that a lot of prose writers learn the hard way as well. But yeah, it helps to have both. Have done a lot of both. Has definitely helped me a lot.
Now, forgive me because I know so little about screenwriting, but did you find that switching to prose, or adding in prose, did you have to either scale back on describing character actions or even ramp it up?
When writing a screenplay, you mean?
No, I'm thinking in writing prose.
Oh, okay. So I'm sorry. Repeat your question. I'm not understanding it 100%.
So I guess my question is, if you are writing if you're writing a story, a short story in prose versus a screenplay, how much description do you do of what characters are doing in the story?
Oh, well, it's different. I do have a tendency to over direct the characters when I'm writing prose. I think it's because I can visualize it so strongly, and I'm literally writing down what each character is doing. And if I had one bit of feedback that early on was, I don't need to know every single, I don't need to know every single little thing. When you're writing prose, it helps to leave stuff to the imagination of the reader. So I would tend to over direct my characters, and I've tried to get out of that. And I've written 3 horror novels since, over the last couple of years, which is, like I said, kind of my focus now. And that was, I had to really, I still found myself editing out over direction of, what characters are doing, and just sort of letting them progress. So like I said, it can be tricky between the two. And I think that has less to do with my screenwriting and more to do with me wanting to just put down exactly what I'm seeing in my head. And it's not really something you want to get in the practice of. You want to be able to stylize it a bit more, so that readers can kind of fill in those blanks themselves. So that's one of the lessons I've been trying to get through my thick head.
Okay, that makes sense. Beyond those pointers, or lessons, whatever the right word is there any other advice that you may have for a young or new screenwriter? Any pitfalls to possibly avoid?
For a screenwriter, particularly?
Yes. Yep.
Don't write for free would be my number one piece of advice. Something that a lot of screenwriters can get, like I mentioned earlier, it's kind of a group effort. And I think what can happen a lot of times to screenwriters who are maybe not represented, or maybe, looking for that first big break, is they tend to do a lot of work for free, where they'll have a director who will be interested in a script, or they'll have a producer who will be interested in a script, and they'll say, "We love it. Let's hop on a call and let's go through, and we're going to give you notes." And so you're like, "Okay, great. This is great." And so you do that, and then they give you all these notes, and you're like, "Okay." And you spend a lot of time rewriting this, the script. And then that happens again, and it happens again. And then next thing you know, you've been working on this screenplay for 6 months. You haven't been paid a dime. And then the financing falls through, and, you're left feeling kind of like an idiot, and everyone else moves on to their other projects. And you're stuck with a screenplay that you have 75 drafts of, and nothing to show for it. So that would probably be my biggest piece of advice: is don't write for free. If you sell your screenplay, or if you option your screenplay to somebody, and they want you to modify it or spend some time changing it, I think there's a degree to which you can do that, but just don't let it get out of hand, and don't let yourself get used too much. But otherwise, no, it's a hard field to break into. I was lucky in that I knew people who were producers, and I could send them the scripts, and I know directors and stuff like that, because I live in LA and I'm kind of in that industry. But it's a thankless, difficult endeavor, much like fiction writing. The difference with fiction writing is, if you write a story and you believe in it, and you go through all the machinations of having somebody design a cover, a professional cover and you have somebody do a professional line edit of your story. And in other words, if you can create a professional product, and then in today's world, you can distribute that product. You can put it out onto Amazon, or you can put it out into the market, or you can, take it around to independent bookstores and have them carry it, which is what I did with my first novel. And you can get the work out there. With a movie, unless somebody makes it, it's never going to be seen. Your idea is never going to be seen, and that's kind of demoralizing. So that's one of the positives to writing prose versus screenwriting is it's your thing. You can do what you want with it. You control it. And if you want to get it out into the world, you can, and that's an exciting, I think, option.
Good points. It's actually eye-opening how many drafts, how many different screenplays certain movies have. Not in this specific case, it's not going from a book to a film, but I'm a big fan of a film that I'm not sure. I think it's got mixed reviews. Freddy vs. Jason. I was a kid when it came out. I personally love it. I think it is what it is. I was really hoping that they added Ash or Michael Myers or Hellraiser to it, but I don't think that's happening.
Give them time.
Maybe they'll remake it, but I bring it up because I love watching behind the scenes. They're free lessons. That's what my godfather. He's an actor in the Boston area, not well known. He's done some that you might have heard, but he's an extra. The biggest one that I'm aware of is Boston Celtic Pride. Have you heard of that one, Phil?
No.
But that was Daniel Stern and was it Dan Aykroyd?
Yeah. So basically, they're both huge Boston Celtic fans. It's I think right past the Larry Bird era, and the Celtics are playing against. I think it's a made-up team. Maybe I'm wrong, but long story short, they end up kidnapping the other team's best player during the playoffs while their teams are playing each other. It's a funny movie, right. But back to Freddy vs. Jason. That had like 20-something different screenplays, and I know one of them was by Mike Judge, the guy that created King of the Hill.
Yeah. I worked with Mike Judge.
All right.
Wow.
Who cares what I'm going to say next? Yeah. Let's talk about that.
No, it's your story.
All I was going to say was the last interesting thing that I found as a fan was that a lot of the screenplays, it's a documentary that comes with the DVD or whatever there is now, 4K or Blu-ray or whatever. Right. And it said a lot of the stories were rejected because they were based in like a cult for Freddy Krueger called Fredheads. And that's really it, man. So let's talk about you and Mike Judge, because I didn't know that.
Yeah, well, I worked with Mike on a show called Silicon Valley, HBO show.
Yeah.
And I worked on Silicon Valley I did 3.5 seasons as a location guy. So, Mike was obviously the showrunner and one of the directors that we had on the show. And as was Alec Berg, who went on to do Barry, the very funny show Barry for HBO. But that was so it was he's an interesting cat. Does not take elevators. So there you go. There's your Mike Judge factoid of the day. Has to so we always had to make sure that he had a way to get up to the set if we were not on the ground floor. But yeah, he was an interesting cat. And he came out pretty strongly against, I don't know if you guys remember, but there was I think it was season 5. One of the actors, I can't remember his name, TJ, the big guy.
Miller, is it?
TJ Miller, yeah, but he would stop. We had to keep like shutting down production because he would not show up for work, and they ended up parting ways with him the next season. But Mike Judge, it was kind of funny because TJ Miller and some of the HBO guys were like, well, it was mutual this and mutual that, and we wish TJ the best. But then Mike Judge was actually interviewed, and he was like, he was a pain in the ass, and he wouldn't show up for work, and it would cost us hundreds of thousands of dollars. and you've got hundreds of people sitting there waiting for you to, who they're all on time, they're all doing their jobs, and you're not doing yours. And it was just kind of very un-Hollywood of Mike to kind of be like, no, let me tell you what happened. But anyway, yeah, he's a whatever, interesting cat, and that was a pretty funny show, and it was fun to work on, for the few years that I did. But yeah, to your point, people are shocked. I think people would be shocked at how many variations of screenplays are gone through before an actual movie is made, or even while a movie is being made. I think people would also be shocked at the state of screenplays during filming. There are giant $100 million movies that begin production with unfinished screenplays, or screenplays that are still in flux, where the ending hasn't been written or figured out yet.
Oh my God.
And it's terrifying. And it's, and it, same with some TV shows, but because usually, because there's always a lot of writers hired to do their kind of pitch, right? Here's how I see the new Star Trek movie. Here's how I would, here's my pitch of the new Star Trek movie. And then maybe they they liked it what this one guy did, so they'll hire that guy. And then that guy will do a couple drafts or a couple whatever, and then they'll be like, okay, well, we think you've taken us as far as you can take us, so we're going to bring in this other big writer. We're going to pay him a couple $100,000 to do a rewrite. And then they'll bring another big writer in, and then big writer will do his thing. And they'll bring another writer in, then they'll bring another writer in. And so you're getting all these different drafts or all these different rewrites, and then a bunch of studio executives sit around and say, these are the things we like, these are the things we don't like, these are the things that test well, these are the things that don't test well. And, and sadly, that's the way most Hollywood movies are made, which is why in the independent movies that are directed by one person and written by one person are usually a lot more interesting than what you see on the big screens or whatever, because they're actual visions of, they're somebody's vision, one person's unique vision versus, what a studio thinks will make money or not make money, which is also why you see a lot of this stuff that comes out, like with Zack Snyder, the Snyder Cut for Justice League, with the kid who did the Fantastic Four,
Josh Trank.
Yeah, Josh Trank.
Yeah.
He came out after 4 came out and was like, "That's not my movie," because that's not the way those big movies are made. So yeah, it's you'd be surprised. I mean, even the movie that I wrote, it's called Girl Missing. It was on Lifetime television. I knew the director. I knew the producer. I was there on set every day doing rewrites. And before we even before we began filming that movie, we shot in Minnesota. I had done something like 23 rewrites, and the whole time we were in Minnesota, I was writing. The night before, the director would be in a hotel room writing scenes for the next day. So it's a constant evolving process. And even that doesn't stop even when filming stops. It doesn't stop until the movie is released, because there's rewrites, there's reshoots, there's a lot of stuff that happens after the movie is made. So yeah, like I said, it's a group project, and screenwriter is really just one cog in the machine.
Wow, you just pretty much said everything for me. I'm being selfish here for 1 second. I love listening to creators of all kinds talk. I like hearing how they think, why they think the way that they think. Through horror, specifically recently, I've been listening to a lot of horror podcasts, and I just hear a lot of the times when the question's brought up, well, what if your story turns into a film or Netflix, which is a very, I think, more realistic idea now. I don't know how it was before Netflix, but I don't see why it's not possible. Like Paul Tremblay, I know, had a head full of ghosts sold to Robert Downey Jr.'s production company.
Mm-hmm.
So I think about that, and because I'm a writer, I'm never going to stop writing. I know one of the keys to being successful is perseverance. So I can't help but think, what if? So I'm just thinking, before you said that, I don't really want to write the screenplay. I love writing novels, short stories. I like prose. That's my thing, man. I love movies to watch. That's just my personal preference.
Right.
But you talking about all the technicalities and stuff, I'm thinking that's time taken away from a book that I could write. That's time from like 6 short stories that I could write. It sounds a lot more in depth than I ever would have imagined.
Right. Let me tell you, let me just tell you so you know. If you're debating between spending your time writing a story and writing a screenplay, write the story because you have a better shot of selling a story to be adapted into a movie than you do writing a screenplay that'll be made into a movie. And when I say better shot, I don't mean sort of better. I mean like 1,000% better. Because studios do not want to buy a screenplay that is based on nothing. They want to buy a screenplay that was a graphic novel. They want to buy a screenplay that was published in an anthology, that was a short story. They want it to be an adapted material, and it's much easier, much easier to sell or to option a short story or a novel for film than it is to write an original screenplay and have it considered for film. And you get paid probably just as well as you would if you wrote the screenplay. And um, uh, and I'll tell you, I'll back up my words. I've written, I don't know, 20 screenplays. The last 2 novels I wrote, a novel called Gothic and a novel called Boys in the Valley, which I'm putting the final touches on now, are both screenplays that I'm adapting to prose, because the screenplays I know will never get made as they are, but if I can sell them as a novel, then I have a better chance of getting them made into films. And I've already got the screenplays written, so there's the bonus.
Wow.
But I can't announce this officially, but I can tell you that I've been working with a company, an agency who has been trying to sell my short stories to studios and to producers, and I've already sold stuff that and have made more money and have a much better possibility of that story getting made into a movie than any screenplay I ever wrote. So I definitely think you're thinking about it the right way. The only good thing about knowing how to write a screenplay, and I've had this conversation with guys like Josh and Paul and Laird, is if you do sell a story and you actually have a little power, you have a bit more of a bigger name than I do, you can make the case that you want to write the screenplay for your own story, your own novel, and that's why it might be helpful to know how to do that. But as far as like Gillian Flynn's the great example, right? She wrote the screenplay for Gone Girl. It was a huge hit. But that's why it's a good skill to know it for that reason. But otherwise, no, I would just really what studios want is they want to buy your idea. So a short story that I optioned, I should say, recently is, I think, 5,000 words, right? And what I made optioning that story compared to like what I've made selling every, short stories for all these different publications is night and day. So you're better off creating these original ideas, getting them out into the world, getting an anthology to pick them up, or putting out your own set of stories or whatever the case might be, and hope that the right person reads them. I mean, I was lucky in that my first collection, when my debut collection came out, it was written up in the New York Times as part of their summer horror piece that they did, and it was me and Brandon McLeod and Josh Mallerman were all part of this kind of big kind of article, and that got a lot of people calling me and calling my agent at the time. So stuff like that can really help. Not that everyone's going to be able to get in the New York Times. I was very lucky to be able to do it, but any promotion you can get to promote your work and to get it out there and get it read is probably the better avenue than trying to write screenplays.
Mm. So I'm curious. You've been writing and publishing, getting your prose out there for 5 years, and it certainly sounds like you've been very prolific. Now, if that continues ascending and ascending, like it definitely should, would you always want to keep one foot in the film business, or?
You mean as far as my day job is concerned?
Yeah, I mean, if you didn't need to do it, would you still want to, I guess?
No, I would not be doing it.
You made it sound like a right pain in the ass, so I was trying to think about political.
It's I wouldn't wish my job on my worst enemy. It's no, it's not something that I find pleasure in. It pays my bills. I'm part of a union, so I have a nice insurance package. I have a nice pension package. So all those practical things are nice. But no, if I can scratch out a living writing full time, I will. I say that, but there's part of me that probably, and I've actually had this conversation with my wife. There's part of me that probably thinks like, well, because in the film business, when you're in a union, you have to work X amount, like most unions, I guess. When you're freelance, you have to work X amount of days to stay current with that union, right? And it's not very many. So I could see a world where I was sort of working the minimum amount of days every year so that I could keep my insurance and my pension. But no, the dream is to not have to do that, so that I can write full time, and that's kind of what I've been working really hard to try and get to that point. I don't know if I will. I don't know if I ever will, but I'm trying.
Is that a Teamster union?
Yeah, I'm a Teamster technically.
Is that Local 25, or is that maybe that's just in Cambridge? I think it's
no, the LA local. My local is 399.
Okay, yeah, all right. So yeah, it'd be a lot different than in Boston. I bring that up because my paternal grandfather was a local Teamster in Massachusetts. He's a truck driver. After he came back from the war, I was in the same, or not the same union, but I was also a local Teamster for 2 years, delivering booze as a kid.
Yeah.
And fun factoid, I figured you two would appreciate this, is what they gave away during the holidays was a free case of any beer that we delivered for free. I could not have it either year because I was 18 to 20 years old when I worked there. So I got it was like, I want free beer, but nothing.
What did they give you instead? Anything?
I got nothing.
What?
I got a job.
Yeah.
And then I got laid off.
Yeah. So exactly. But location guys, which is what I do, we're Teamsters. So we're in the same, all the drivers, all the the transportation department, we're lumped in with those guys, primarily because there's not enough of us to kind of, need our own union. So they kind of lumped us in with the drivers. So, which is great because they're the most powerful union, of all of them. So, so it's not a bad one to be lumped in with.
So that's Jimmy Hoffa.
Yeah, exactly.
So Phil,
no one messes with the Teamsters.
I'm curious, what are the duties of a location manager?
Location. Okay, so I'm what's called a key assistant location manager, which basically means there's a location manager. Sometimes there's a supervising location manager, and I work for those guys. And then there's location assistants who work for me. So, but basically, we scout locations, we secure locations. We are in charge of all the logistics for the location. So we have to get, and we have to permit the locations and everything that we do there. So we're dealing with the city, we're dealing with cops, we're dealing with fire department, We are dealing with closing down streets. We are dealing with neighbors. We're making the deal with the building or the owner of the house or whatever it is. We have to figure out a place to park, 250 crew members. We have to park our trucks and our base camp and the wagons and the trailers and all that stuff. So all the logistics that go into filming at a location is the responsibility of one guy, and that's me if it's my location. So I'm had to make sure everybody has a place to park, has a place to go to the bathroom. I have to make sure that the caterer has a place to serve lunch. I have to make sure that the street closures are in place, that the cops are in the right place, that the permit is done with the city properly. So it's it's a lot of work, and it's a lot of stress, especially when you have when you show up at a location and you've planned for everything to be shooting this way, and the director shows up and goes, "Hey, you know what? I want to shoot that way," and it creates a whole litany of problems, and you're running around trying to figure out. It's tricky, but that's basically what the job description is. It's if we're on a stage, like a sound stage or something, for us, we're, those days we're usually out scouting, photographing potential places to film, or prepping for the locations that the crew will be shooting in later in the schedule. But yeah, it's a lot of work. But yeah, it covers everything from scouting to finding all the locations where they shoot, to the logistics of the shoot day itself, and then making sure everything is put back the way it's supposed to be when everybody leaves.
I'm glad you were candid with us earlier. I don't feel bad now saying that sounds like a fucking nightmare.
Yeah, it is. And, and it's one of those things where, you're, the only time you're noticed is when something goes wrong. When everything goes right, people just assume that they just showed up and everything just happened to be, open and ready and everything's in its place and stuff like that. And they don't really think about it. But if something goes wrong, all the blame falls on you. So it's kind of a thankless job. But like I said, it's a job, and it pays well, and there's insurance and all that good stuff. I have not worked since December of last year, though, so it's been this is the longest stretch I've had since I started this job. So it's getting a little tight. Production is supposed to start again in July. That's what they're saying, with all the precautions and all that stuff for the pandemic. But yeah, production has pretty much been shut down since February. So everybody's a little anxious here in Los Angeles to get back to work, but also worried about getting back to work. And because when you're filming, you're in very close proximity to a lot of people. And a lot of times it's unavoidable. If you're shooting in a room or in an office building or a warehouse or whatever, everybody's kind of crammed in there together, or a stage. So it's going to be tricky. I'm not sure exactly how they're going to pull it all off, but it's going to be a very different world I return to than the one that I left. So I'm very curious to see how it goes.
Yeah, I'm currently planning. I'm a teacher for my day job, so we're currently planning for what school is going to look like in the fall, and the plan on paper, versus when we actually get back to work. I can't imagine the two kind of coinciding, and I would think it's kind of the same for you. Yeah,
schools are going to be rough. I don't know how that's going to work. I really don't. I mean, my kid is 19, so he's in college, and it's been really hard for him because he misses being around kids. He misses being at school, and everything's, and they just announced for his school the fall semester is going to be remote, so he'll be, which he was very upset about. So he's going to still be stuck at home and doing everything online. And, but yeah, for all those kids, man, I don't know. I hope it works out. I hope for the best. We'll see.
Yeah. A 19-year-old starting their sophomore year is, technically equipped to handle learning in that way, but it's missing out on that college experience. It's not fair. I mean, is what it boils down to.
Yeah, it's not fair, and I feel bad for him. You know, I don't care. I'm an introvert. Like if I was, if, you know, like it's funny because I watch those, you know, I watch movies and you'll see somebody in their prison cell, you know, serving 30 years, and I just be like, oh man, that looks awesome. Look at that cell. They have all this. They got their own little bed there.
How many books can I write during those,
right?
those
They got their
30 years?
They don't have to go anywhere. They don't have to see anybody. So I'm totally content just like staying in my office and working and stuff. But for him, yeah, it's been rough. He's you know, the kids. I think for the kids, it's been harder. I mean, obviously, parents have had it hard because the kids are home. But I feel bad for the kids that are, you know, missing out on their normal growing up experiences. So hopefully you know, we only have a few more months of this and things will start, you know, slowing down. Fingers crossed.
I wonder what this is going to do for that generation. Obviously, things are going to be weird for us, but like my father's parents were born in the late 20s and early 30s, so they just missed the Great Depression. But I'm sure that their parents kind of instilled some hoarding, because when my nana died, um, we went through her stuff at her house, and my dad's like, whose photograph book is that? Wait, is that my mom? When she's never shown us this, and we got this beautiful drawing of her and it's okay. Her and her my papa when they got married, and never hung it because she's this sweet little Catholic woman that doesn't like anything too big of herself, and just there was a bunch of stuff. So I'm curious. I'm thinking like, kids that are old enough to really like your son, he's 19. My kid's only 7 months old. Almost Brennan's he's got younger kids, so maybe it won't affect them the same. But like, what's this gonna do to them psychologically? Because they're gonna remember like, oh shit, I remember when everything had to be, you know, mask on, gloves on, potentially.
Yeah.
It could come back too.
I think you know, the thing with kids is they're so resilient. They, you know, and they you know, I'm always impressed with a kid's ability to work around stuff that really throws adults for a loop. I think they'll be fine. I think if it goes on for, you know, were to go on for a few more years, I think then you know, that's something that would impact you for the rest of your life. But I think for now, I'm hoping that it's something that he kind of, you know, looks back on as an interesting experience, but doesn't necessarily, you know, scar him for life or anything. But for like, and I think for little kids, you know, I watch that John Krasinski, you know, Good News show, and I see the little kids that he has on there all the time doing crazy stuff. And I think, you know, you kind of hope like for a lot of kids that it'll be something to look back on almost fondly, you know, where there was this crazy time where we were at home with our parents all the time and we didn't have to go to school and we were just doing like arts and crafts and shit all day. And, you know, who knows, but yeah, I'd like to think that, that it's something that will stick with them in a positive way. Like if nothing else, man, the generation growing up now is going to know how to wash their fucking hands. Like something that we did not really worry too much about, you know, and, you know, those guys are going to know all about hand washing and the use of, you know, hand sanitizers and stuff like that. So maybe
this is,
I agree.
Yeah, this is their this is going to be their walking to school 15 miles in the snow uphill both ways moment too. I mean, God help.
I was in school, there was a pandemic.
God help my grandkids if they ever say they're bored.
Yeah.
It's life for me's been weird, man, because like I am an essential employee. I work at a wastewater treatment plant where basically we have in my county all the shit and piss water come in. So if my company closes down, the sewers will back up and have shit and piss water all over. So work's been it's open 24/7. It's been weird. Like 2 months ago, pretty much no cars were out whenever I went to work. no stores were open, and now it's slowly. I'm just seeing traffic kind of get back to normal. My
Yeah.
wife's been home with the kid every day. It's a very weird time,
Yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
affecting writers, specifically writers. Some they're paralyzed from it, can't do anything really. Others, I'm not bragging or nothing, but like I've been writing nonstop, so
Yeah.
I don't know. It's really it's weird all around.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because I wrote I finished writing a novel in February. I think I'm doing the math. I think the math is right on that. And I turned it into my agent, and this is right before the pandemic really took off. So whenever this was, early late January maybe, and I turned in this novel called Gothic, and I was like, and this is like probably February, and I was like, well, I'm probably gonna have to go back to work pretty soon, so I'm gonna get this novel done, and then I'm gonna write a few short stories that I owe, and then I'll probably have to, once I go, because when I'm working, I don't really write much. I work very long hours when I'm working, and very odd hours. I'll be getting up at 2 or 3 in the morning, and working a 16-hour day. So locations is a very, very long day, um uh but then the pandemic hit, right? And I was like, and I had this other novel that I wanted to write, and I even told my agent, I said, I'm probably not going to be able to get it to you till the end of the year because I got to make some money, and then I'll probably maybe I'll get back to it at the end of summer or something. But then the pandemic hit, so I was like, oh my God, wait a minute, now I've got all this time, I can't work, so I don't have to feel the guilt of not working, like what I usually do when I take time off work to write. And I was like, well, shit, I'm gonna see if I can knock out this novel. And so I wrote another. So I wrote a third. I wrote the new novel. I wrote it. Um, it's 80,000 words, and I wrote it in April and May. And now I'm doing the edits of it right now, and I'm turning it in. I'm supposed to turn it in at the end of the week, to my agent. So yeah. So for me, if you want to look at silver linings, which is I know which I understand I understand how horrible it is. I'm not suggesting I don't. But if there's a silver lining for me personally, it's that I had like all this extra time to write, and I really took advantage of it, and I cranked out this novel, and now now I really need to get back to work. I'm hoping that I don't have more time because I'll be out of money. But yeah, I really kind of loved having like all that time to be stuck at home and be quarantined, and I used it to knock out this novel. So I was really happy about it because now I have 3 novels that my agent is trying to sell, and I feel like I can kind of relax a little bit. And I don't feel the urgency to have to, write another novel right away because I feel like she's got enough product at this point to try and move. So yeah, the quarantine's worked out really well for me. But I've seen the same post. I've seen people saying like, can't write, wrote 4 words today, too depressed and stuff. And I'm like, man, this is like the time. Like you can just, you're still working. Like you said, you're an essential employee, but I was not. So for me, it was like, that's how I always am. When I'm not working in film industry, I'm really working hard on the writing because I know I only have a limited window to do it. So I'm at my desk, 10 hours a day. So that's kind of how it was these last couple months. So, yeah, for me, it's been, luckily I have the kind of mindset where I was depressed and I was angry about all this stuff, but I love being quarantined. Like I said, I love that kind of, I don't mind just being stuck at home. I was happy just to kind of, escape into my my world of fiction and write a new novel. So it was great for me.
80,000 words in 2 months. That's excellent. My rule of thumb that I mean, it's just a super loose rule, but I feel good if I'm aiming to write a full length novel. I feel good with like 3 months for 90,000 plus words.
Mhm.
3 months for 90,000 words, 30,000 words a month. I feel like that's like, I pat myself on the back if I achieve
Yeah.
that.
1,000 words a day is a very good goal. That's kind of what I use as my goal when I'm working on a project. I'd like to try and get at least 1,000 words a day down. Different writers it's different. Paul Tremblay is famous for saying he writes 500 words a day.
Yeah.
And he writes, but what he doesn't always, say, but we don't always hear it, is that he writes 500 words a day, but then he rewrites those 500 words and rewrites those 500 words until it's perfect, and then he moves on to the next. So he rewrites while he's writing kind of guy. Don't do that. I basically just burn through the first draft. I'm looking at so Boys in the Valley, I wrote, because I put the dates on my manuscript. So I wrote the first draft. Started writing it April 19th, and I finished it on May 25th. So about 5 weeks.
That's awesome.
But I'm writing I'm doing the rewrites right now. I took a week off because I didn't want to look at it for a week. And it's taken me, I've been doing the rewrites already for a couple of weeks. So the rewrites are as important a lot of ways as the actual writing is. And I really want to make sure, and I'll be doing another, and I'll probably I always do like one rewrite, which is when I'm just kind of going through the story again in Word or whatever at the computer. And then I print that out and I read it in print form, and I do my hand edits. And then I go back and I put all those edits in. And then what I've recently started doing the last couple of novels is I go to Amazon and I print it in as a book. So here, I'll show you. Hold on. Your audio guys won't be able to see this, but so I create these like Amazon like arcs of the manuscripts. So these are just manuscripts of like bound manuscript. But what's cool about it is it's cheaper than printing it out. Like if you print out, a 300 or 400 page manuscript at home, you're spending a lot of money on paper and ink. If you order it on Amazon as an arc, it costs like $4, and you get like a bound copy of it that you can like. And so then what I do is I bind it and I read it like I would read it like a book, and I make notes in the actual book. So I find that each time I read it in those different ways, I find new stuff that I need to fix. And it's like if you read it out loud, you'll find stuff to fix that you won't notice if you're reading it in your head. But that's a cool solution for writers. If you want to read your book in book form, I recommend doing it on the Amazon platform, and just throw your manuscript up there, throw a generic cover on it, and what you do is you just order it as an arc. So don't actually publish it, but then but just set it up and then order. Actually, I think you can order 10 at a time, and that's a really good way to kind of like, and it's kind of fun to have like a mock-up of the book. But it's been helpful. Like I was sending it to one publisher during the pandemic, and I was like, hey, I want to send you this new novel to look at. And he's a friend. Which is why I wasn't going to my agent. And he said, well, I said, but I actually have a bound copy. If you want me to send you a bound copy, I'll send you a bound copy. And he was like, yeah, that'd be great, because it's so hard for me right now to read on my computer because, blah, blah, blah. I'm not at the office and all this stuff. So I just sent it to his house. So it's a nice way to get, or if you want to send it somebody to Blurb or something like that, you can just send them a copy. Yeah. So it's a cool little trick. I've been really happy that I did it. I found it really helpful.
That's a great tip. One that I go to, I don't know if you've heard of him. He's in the UK, Mark Cassell. He is a guy that I often go to for advice. And one suggestion he had was the second draft, print it up, take out your red pen, but reformat it. And thinking in my head, it's probably going to be cheaper your way if you got a big, thick book. But for short stories, this is great.
Oh, yeah.
You format it so it's a landscape, and then you put them in 2 columns. Make the font a little bit bigger because your eye can catch them, and put it from Times New Roman, which is what he and I use most of the time, in Garamond, I think it is.
Mm-hmm.
That way, and have a line between the 2 columns. That way, it looks like a printed book. The font, if it's bigger, like 16, 18, you'll catch it a lot easier. Garamond, the point of that is because your eye can catch things a little bit different. Take the red pen out, mark the. I like good feedback, which actually I'm thinking about. I'd like to know your take on beta readers because I've heard some writers say never use them. Christopher Golden actually, because I asked him, because what like he's someone that I listen to him. I listen to people. I obviously listen to more than just him, but like he's someone that if he gives advice, listen. He's done it successfully, but he said sometimes I use 3, sometimes I use none. For me personally, I like beta readers. I've learned to realize which ones to go back to and which ones never to go back to.
Right.
And something that if a new writer is listening to this, and actually I thought I wanted to be a screenwriter when I was younger, before I started writing prose. So I did a bunch of YouTube videos for fun. I edited them, got my friends in it. I've noticed a similarity with shooting a film and writing or any kind of art. When you tell your friends, your general populace friends, and say, hey, I got this project or I wrote this book, 9 times out of 10, they'll be excited and say, I want in on that or to read that or to be a part of it. And then 9 times out of 10, maybe one of those friends will actually follow through. And even if they follow through, they're just like, oh, it's just a home video. But like in my head, for me, Kevin Smith's been my biggest influence. And I'm like, that guy is one of us, so why can't I do it? But now I want to write prose. So I guess this is my long-winded way of asking, like, beta readers, what's your take on them? And then do you have anything to add on for newer writers that might be listening, as far as like who you maybe should avoid going to as far as like friends go, or maybe not get your hopes up?
Yeah. Well, it's a good question. By the way, Brendan, I think, just opened a beer, and I'm super jealous right now because I don't have a beer here. Just all the way downstairs. But it's a good question. And my personal take on beta readers is that I do like beta readers. I have used beta readers throughout my short career. The key to beta readers is to know what to accept and what to reject. And what I mean by that is, let me back up a step by saying this. When my collection came out, there's 9 stories in my collection. And the thing that caught me completely off guard, and that has taught me more than anything else I've learned in fiction writing, was how wildly different the reception was to each and every story by all these different readers. I would literally get reviews where one guy would say, just finished this book. McDonough was the greatest story I've ever read, but I hated Surfer Girl. And literally the next reviewer would say, I just finished this book. Surfer Girl is a classic, but I really did not care for McDonough. And I could go on and on. But I was shocked. It wasn't just like, yeah, I like this story more than this story. It was literally like people were passionately saying how much they hated one story and loved another story. And then literally I would see the exact opposite 3 reviewers later. And everybody has a different favorite story in that book. And that really shocked me in a way, because it makes you realize that you can't write for all readers. You can only write for yourself, because nobody's going to like everything you write. And some people are going to like stuff that other people don't like, and other people are going to dislike stuff that other people like. So you can't write to please everybody, because you're not going to please everybody. It's not going to happen. You're creating art. You're not creating, math. So there's more than one solution. So if you know that going in, and to finish that point as it pertains to beta readers, if you understand that going into beta readers, then you have established the fact that not all beta readers are going to like or dislike the same things in your manuscript. One beta reader may say, I really loved this character, but I really hated the way you did this scene. And the next beta reader may say the exact opposite. So the key to beta readers is to not take everything they say as gospel, to filter through the things that they're saying that you agree with, and the things you don't agree with, you're welcome to dismiss. You should dismiss, and and because what this beta reader likes may not be what somebody else likes. But if this beta reader says something like, "I thought that this character was kind of underdeveloped," and then maybe 2 or 3 other beta readers say the same thing, okay, well, hold on, now maybe this is something I should take a longer look at. So that's the good thing about beta readers, because if they all say something is a problem, then the chances are good that it's a problem. If if one person says something and another person says something different, then it's up to you as the writer to say, should I take another look at that? And is there a way for me to fix that where it doesn't necessarily change it so that I'm swaying the pendulum too far the other way? So, and then the last thing I'll say about beta readers is also, it kind of depends on who the beta reader is. So, for example, if Laird Barron is my beta reader, I'm pretty much, it's pretty much gospel, because Laird knows what he's doing. He's been doing it for a long time, and he's an amazingly talented writer. So I listen to him. When he tells me something isn't working, he gets way more weight than like my mom or whatever. So that's the thing with beta readers. So you have to kind of weigh, how much you think each one, how much of what they're saying is something that you should take as gospel. And then also you just have to know that, like, if someone says they don't like something, or if someone says you should do something, it doesn't mean you should do it. It doesn't mean you should change it. It just means this one particular person had this one opinion. So you just have to be able to filter through all that static and all that kind of, it's kind of like data gathering, right? You're data gathering, and you're kind of looking for the spikes, in the data, and the spikes are what you want to pay attention to. So that would be my advice regarding beta readers: is don't take it personally. Don't take everything that a beta reader says as gospel, and look for the spikes, but feel free to say, I like what this person said about this. I find that interesting. Maybe I'll take another look at it, but I think what they're saying about that is wrong. I disagree. I'm going to leave it as it is.
Okay, perfect. Let's change gears here for a minute, and I'm just going to quote something from your website. It says that you were, before all this, a live music producer where you produced concert DVDs for the Psychedelic Furs, Public Enemy, and 3,000 live internet broadcasts with bands such as The Cure, Motley Crue, and Depeche Mode. Something that I just found absolutely fascinating was the next piece of information. You also produced the first live streaming concert ever broadcast over the internet. So I'll break it down one question at a time, because I'm sure it's a lot to take in. Were you the one that came up with that idea?
To stream live over the internet?
Yeah.
No. That was done by people much smarter than me. No, I was the producer of the event. So at the time of all that stuff you're describing, I was working for House of Blues Entertainment, which was a live concert promoter. And this is in the late 90s. So I started House of Blues in 95. I left House of Blues in 2001. And when I was there, House of Blues was the second largest concert promoter in the world, only behind a company called Clear Channel, which I think is now called Live Concerts. Or I can't remember. Anyway, but I think they changed their name, and they also own a bunch of radio stations and stuff like that. So, so this was in 95. The internet was pretty new. Streaming wasn't really, hadn't been invented yet, or hadn't, and there were 2 companies who were doing it. There was Microsoft and their Real Player, and then there was a company called Real Networks. Oh no, sorry, Real Networks are the Real Player. Microsoft had I don't remember what they called their player, but they had like their own kind of streaming box. And at first it was only audio. So if you had your dial-up modem, you could log on and you could get streaming audio of somebody talking or whatever. And so when I was at House of Blues, I produced a concert with the Blind Boys of Alabama, and Real Networks, partnered with us because we were providing the content for their technology platform. And so that was the first live audio, live music, live concert ever broadcast over the internet. And we were covered in the Wall Street Journal and Billboard Magazine and USA Today and all this other stuff. And I was flying around the country doing interviews, and like I did a press conference in Las Vegas. So it was kind of a big deal. And actually then we did a live video stream of The Cure and Depeche Mode. And that was a huge deal. And, this is when but it was funny because at the time, the record labels were freaking out because they didn't know what streaming was. They thought we were stealing their content. The artists didn't know what it was. Everybody was, it was so new. It was a Wild West. And this is where Mark Cuban, who now owns the Dallas Mavericks and all that stuff, the billionaire Mark Cuban, he started in the same field. So he owned a company called AudioNet, which then became broadcast.com. And I knew Mark back then, and we worked with him quite a bit. So he was kind of a work peer of mine. I wouldn't say we were friends, but we worked together a lot. And he actually tried to hire me to come work at broadcast.com. And I ended up staying at House of Blues, much to my eternal dismay, because Mark ended up selling that company to Yahoo for $4 billion. And House of Blues ended up never going public. So that was one of the many wrong decisions I made in my life. But yes, so I was producing concerts for House of Blues. I produced them for the internet. Worked very closely with Microsoft and Real Networks. After Real Networks went away, I was ended up working very closely with Microsoft. Went up to Microsoft a bunch of times and met with all their their head guys and stuff and then and produced, like I think you said, like over 3,000 concerts that were streamed over the internet. And then I started producing DVDs. We did a Public Enemy DVD. I did a Psychedelic Furs DVD. So we were producing those for a while. We got into a little bit into TV space. And then the bubble burst in the 2000. The internet bubble burst, and all these startup companies that were had these massive multipliers and were getting billions of dollars of funding, all popped and went away, and the market crashed, and that was the end of my career, my music career. I left House of Blues in 2001, and then took a couple years off, and then opened up a bookstore in Venice Beach, and ran that for 7 years, and owned that, and lost my shirt, and then started started the location gig. So that's what I do now.
Okay, and thanks for that correction. I said Brennan corrected me. It's not Da Peach. I don't know why the fuck I said that.
Depeche Mode? I thought you were being sarcastic. I thought you were like Depeche Mode.
No, I'm just a fucking moron sometimes.
I thought you were being like super witty. You should have just laughed at it. Nobody would have known that. All right. Yeah. Depeche Mode. They were actually pretty cool dudes. They were really nice. The Cure were super nice people. I did a thing with the Deftones. They were not as cool. The coolest thing I ever did, and I can say that with, because when I tell you what it is, you'll agree with me. There's no argument about it. It's the coolest thing I ever did was I produced and this was something I did. I came up with the idea, and it was I produced it for House of Blues and Microsoft. I'm sorry, and Real Networks at the time. Is I did a interview with. I set up an interview with Black Sabbath. All the original members of Black Sabbath were interviewed by the two creators of South Park,
Matt Trey and
no Trey. Yeah, Matt and Trey.
Matt Trey.
I can't remember.
Matt Park and Trey Stone. I want to say
Trey Stone is right. I can't remember Matt's last name. It's not Park. It's something like that. But that was pretty neat. So we were in the foundation room of the House of Blues in Los Angeles and Sunset Strip, and we had all the original members of Black Sabbath there, with the two South Park creators there, and they did like an hour-long interview. They interviewed each other, and I don't know if it's available anywhere or not. But I got a picture of me with all those guys, and I look like I'm 12 years old. But that was pretty interesting. That was an interesting night, and I got to hang out with Ozzy and his wife. for a little while, and I hung out with Trey Stone. Trey of the was
Matt Parker and Trey Stone.
Matt Parker, Trey Stone. Trey Stone was uh, he was a little more kept to himself, and he kind of came in, did his thing, and then sort of left. But he was great. Whereas Matt's more the kind of like the manager of those two. So he was more much more personable. And we hung out for a while, and he would call me for concert tickets and stuff for for years after that. So yeah, so that was a really interesting night. But that was kind of one of the more interesting things I did, along with those other things you mentioned. Yeah.
So I'm super jealous. I'll just flat out say it, because Ozzy's one of my favorite artists ever. I don't talk about this with many friends because I don't know a lot. I've tried, but not a lot talk about new Ozzy albums.
Yeah.
I don't know if you heard "Ordinary Man." It came out this year. I personally loved it.
He's a new album? I didn't even know that.
It's called Ordinary Man. He's got two tracks with Post Malone. They're fucking great. He's got this one track with Elton John called, it's the title of the album, Ordinary Man. He's a living legend, man, and isn't he considered the godfather of metal?
I don't know. That's not my lane, but I would.
Mine either. I just
But to
assumed
me,
he was.
I think he is, right. I mean, he's the godfather of modern rock and roll. I don't know, but yeah, he's a and could not have been more pleasant. His wife Sharon could not have been more nice. So she had so they were very nice people. All those guys were cool. So it was a long time ago, but it was something. It was a night I remember fondly. It was a pretty surreal experience, and it was funny because we were going to do the thing with Black Sabbath. That was already kind of set up because they were playing one of the House of Blues venues, and so I set up the interview, and I think around that time, and I could be misremembering, but I think around that time I remember watching South Park, and I think in one of the episodes they had some sort of Ozzy reference, or Ozzy was in one of the episodes, or there was something Ozzy related, and I was like, and I remember thinking like, oh man, I should call those guys and see if they would do this interview with Black Sabbath. That'd be pretty neat. And so I literally just called their production office. I talked to some assistant, and I told her who I was, and I said, here's what I'm trying to do. And I got a call back an hour later from Matt saying, dude, fuck yeah, let's do it. We're in. So I was like, great. It was that easy.
And also the other reason I'm super envious, because that's a fucking awesome story, is South Park. For me, I was born in '89, so by the time South Park came out, I think '98 it came out. I was only a kid. I specifically remember I played travel basketball my whole adolescence and childhood. And we were staying in a hotel, me and the team, the parents were all together doing whatever. Me and all the kids on the team got in one room, watched a South Park movie. Now, I mean, like, whether the parents were aware of that, I don't know, but I specifically remember almost every sleepover. Somehow I watched that movie, and it was just like, my parents weren't like cool with just like, say fucking shit, say whatever you want, because I was like 10 or 11.
But like, it's a cartoon. How bad could it be?
That was in the Guinness Book world record of having the most swears in an animation film ever. I don't know if it still does, but it's just the silliest movie. And I don't know how you feel about this, but when I see things about people just seriously getting pissed about that show, I just think you're exactly the type of people that Matt and Trey target and make fun of.
Yeah.
And that's a show that could never, if they wanted, they could do it until the day they die, because it's social commentary.
They just might. I mean, look at The Simpsons. That's
30 something years.
Why not just keep going? Like, it's making money, so who cares?
Now changing gears for something, I actually was curious because it kind of it's. I don't know if the creator meant to do this, but it's commentary on basically making films in LA. There's this film that I reviewed. It's the first film I reviewed for my platform, called Green Light, starring Chase Williamson. Chris Brown's in it, and the horror queen Caroline. I might have fucked up that first name. Carolyn Williams from Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. It's called Green Light. came out last year, or this year. I honestly, times just morphed together, so I don't know. But
especially now, yeah.
it's basically about a guy that he's a director. He keeps doing shorts. He wants a feature. Doesn't have the money for it. But he's got this one guy played by Chris Browning who says, "Listen, I'll back you up." And then eventually, I think this is in the synopsis, he puts him in a situation where he has to do something pretty fucked up, and he can't get out of it. And he's got to finish this film, and the fucked up thing is gonna happen while he's filming. It's engrossing. I'm curious.
Interesting.
I'm wondering if you've heard of that, because I don't know, especially with the pandemic, because I think it was supposed to be out on the circuit, the film festival circuit, but I mean, obviously I don't think that happened.
No, I've never heard of it, but it sounds pretty interesting.
It's Chase Williamson. I don't know if either one of you heard of him, but he's in John Dies at the End. He's in a lot of other movies a lot of other horror movies that they're fun movies. There's this one, and I'll last thing I want to say about this is this one that came out last year called Arctic. It's the most 180 degree change from Chase's other films, where he's normally like a regular guy in most of his films, and just he's put in a really fucked up scenario. In Arctic, he plays this kind of a trashy white guy, but he gets mixed up with a serial killer, and it's like extreme horror. And it's just, if you get a chance to watch a film and
That's not the one with what's his face, the guy from Hannibal, is it?
You're
Mans Mandelson or something weird like that.
No, the actor, I've never seen him before this film. His name's Jerry G. Angelo.
Oh, okay.
But if you're ever looking for like a horror that's
Arctic,
it's called Arctic, Artik.
Arctic.
Yeah,
I'm thinking Arctic, like the North Pole.
Oh no, yeah,
okay.
Sorry,
Arctic. All right.
I never learned how to talk properly.
No, it's a weird word. It's a Arctic, made up word.
I'm still hung up on the peach mode. Although you did say you were born in '89, so I mean, I guess you get a little bit of a pass there.
Brennan texted me and was like, "You said this," basically implying I'm a fucking idiot, and I don't blame him. So I would love to talk about something that I bit my tongue on from not texting you, Philip, because I love telling people unless I don't really talk to them regularly or whatever, I love telling people when I love something they made. So I read My Love, Do Not Wake, and the Review or Die series. Book one, The Midnight Exhibit. I'm not gonna. Do you mind just describing that so I don't give anything away?
That's a messed up. That's a messed up story, isn't it?
I fucking love it.
Well, the elevator pitch is a woman has an affair with the back of her husband's head. Right? So I don't know.
It conjures up very different images than the story goes, but okay, we'll go with that.
Brendan, what's your take on it? Without giving anything away.
My take on it is that what Philip, the elevator pitch that we just got is technically accurate, but that you should but you should absolutely read it for yourself. So for those who don't know, that book also has a story by Stephen Graham Jones in it. And off the top of my head, I think it's Renee Miller, maybe.
Renee Miller, yeah.
Yeah, she also had a really, really good story in that. So I'm curious because I kind of want to leave it at just the elevator pitch. How did you get invited or hooked up to work in that kind of mini anthology?
Oh, so Eddie Generous is the editor and publisher of Unnerving Press. It's his thing. And he and I did a book, I think in 2018, called Overnight, which was a standalone chapbook. I can show you a picture of it for those. See, that's Overnight. It's a limited edition hardcover that Eddie put out through Unnerving Press, and I don't remember. I don't remember how we had connected before that. I think he might have. I think he just read my collection and wanted to know if I would do something with him, and I did. So we published that, and so when he did this whatever it's Rewind or Die, is that what it's called?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I have it right here. What is this thing called? Midnight Exhibit 1. I don't know what the name of the thing is he sells, but Midnight Exhibit Volume 1. Yeah. So this is the book. So yeah. So he asked me if I wanted to be part of it, and I give him a story, and I said yeah. And so I wrote My Love Do Not Wake, and that idea. I don't even know how I came up with that idea. I'm trying to remember if it. Normally, I can kind of pinpoint the moment where like it kind of took root. I don't even know. I do remember. I think my wife just got home. But I do remember my wife coming into my office, and I was saying I'm going to start working on a new story, and it's about this woman who falls in love with and has an affair with the back of her husband's head. And I remember her just going, all right, well, I'm going to go downstairs now and fix dinner and whatever. And you just do whatever that is you're doing. But yeah, it's a weird story. And I was happy to have Eddie publish it, and hopefully I'll collect it one day and then in a collection or something. But yeah, it's kind of a wild ride. So I don't really know what else to say about it, but yeah, it's sort of surrealist horror. It's sort of got kind of a little crime noir feel. It's got a little surrealist feel. It's got a little horror feel. It's kind of dark humor, I think, at times, as the husband deals with what's happening to him. So yeah, I'm glad you liked it. It's kind of a weird story. I feel like it's gotten mixed reviews, so I'm always happy to hear people who enjoyed it.
I finished it this morning because that was my first story by you, and Brennan suggested it to me. I'm glad he did. I can't compare it to anything that I've read before, and I loved it, and I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. It makes me certainly want to read more by you. And something that I think I pointed out before in the podcast, even if I didn't read that before, if I'm listening to this show, I would want to read something by you, because that's the whole point of this podcast, or at least it was. That was the sole purpose in the beginning. It's kind of evolved, but it's to get to know the creator behind art, and it's not just writers. We're gonna eventually have other people, but I find that when I listen to a creator, and my personal love started with Joe Rogan's podcast. Just listen to scientists, listen to artists, listen to whomever. I want to learn more about them if they're a nice person, because there's plenty of smart people. The one exception to someone that's a smart person that I would want to listen to no matter what, and maybe get to know and not piss him off, is Steve Jobs, but he's not alive anymore, because that guy's just like so interesting. But
yeah,
I would want to read more stories by you just by listening to the show. And that's what I get with Ink Heist. That's what I get with This Is Horror. I actually listened to your 3-part show too. That was interesting.
thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. The one thing I want to take away from that is we share a fascination with death, and I think about it all the time. It sounds morbid, but we're horror writers. So.
Yeah. See, you can say stuff like that. It's okay. It's a great thing about being with horror writers.
And I'm just curious, as far as that fascination goes, is it more of what's life gonna be like after me, or what am I gonna experience, or is it more so what am I gonna leave behind, and will anyone give a fuck besides my family, or is it a mix of any of that?
It's less of a fascination with death and more of a fascination, to your point, of after death. And I've read a lot of books on the subject, and I've read a lot of theories on the subject, and the idea of transferable energy is very interesting to me, and the idea that um, you know, of what goes on, what goes beyond the veil, as it were, is very fascinating to me. And I've written a lot of stories about the afterlife. I've written a lot of stories about what happens to people when they die. I think if there's a recurring theme in a lot of my stories, it's that I take people beyond death, even if it's only for a split second or for half a page or whatever. But yeah, so I have a fascination with it. I'm fascinated by all the wide variety of beliefs about what happens when we die, all the wide variety of religions that have different takes on it, the scientists who have different takes on it. Maybe we should say metaphysical scientists, but yeah, it's just something that's I've always found really fascinating. And I think it's also incredible fodder for stories. I think it's such a fun thing to play with, and and not just to kill people and then send them into an afterlife situation, but also to play with the idea of how someone's life is affected by what might happen to them when they die, or by other people who may have gone before them coming back, whether it's a ghost story or whether it's some sort of cosmic energy or whether it's some sort of communication from beyond. These are all things that I love to write about. And in a way, it's kind of almost, there's a bit of an element of that in My Love, Do Not Wake, which is, in a lot of ways without, no, I guess I don't want to give it, I want to be spoiler free, but there's definitely an element of like, what, how life can go on in that story,
Yeah.
Absolutely. So yeah, so it's just something that fascinates me. It's just, for whatever reason, it's a recurring theme. I kind of, I enjoy describing, this sort of like the alternate dimension, of where the soul ends up, and yeah, like in some stories it's a very negative thing, and in some stories it's a very positive thing, and in some stories it's very ambiguous. So it's not something that I don't have a one note reply to. It's something I kind of play with a lot in the different stuff I do.
Which is well, that's a good thing, because like, let's just go through a quick timeline of human history. I mean, before the biggest religion in this country, Christianity, there was thousands of religions throughout the world. You got the Aztecs, the Mayans, ancient Egypt, throughout Asia. They all believed in multiple deities or gods. There's one, and someone may butcher me for fucking this up, but I saw a documentary on ancient Egypt, and I don't know what the specific religion was called, but it was the most bizarre religion that I heard of how things were created. There was one god that masturbated, and he made deities, lesser power gods, and they fucked, and they were lesser power gods, and it went on until humans came around. I mean, who knows what happened? That might be it.
I'll tell you what's really interesting about some of that stuff is that I was reading a book recently that talked about how, and one example is the flood, but how often there are how many similarities there are between all these different religions and groups of people and cultures who have never interacted before, and who have had no interaction, and who all have different histories and different different geographical locations, but so many of the stories are the same. And the flood is an example where the flood, people like to say, well, the flood was copied by Christianity, but the reality is that there were 4 or 5 major world religions that all have some version of the story of the flood of Noah's Ark. And obviously the details vary, but the fact that the world was taken over in a flood is in all these different religions' histories, and so it's really and so there's a lot of other examples of that where they have very similar, like the Son of God being sacrificed and all. Like Egypt, Christianity, people say, well, is based on Egypt, the son of Ra, and all that stuff, but the timeline doesn't work out that way. The timeline works out that actually they should have all been, they're all actually pretty simultaneous. So, but yes, it's a fascinating thing to dive into, and all the different cultures and what they all believed and that kind of stuff. So, history becomes, like I was saying at the very beginning, history becomes horror, and a lot of horror is exploring these very uncomfortable ideas and very uncomfortable scenarios, and how it affects everyday people.
Yeah, I'd be really interested to see if there was like a scientific, or whatever the proper terminology is, trend of what led up to that flood. If there's even a way to possibly trend that, and then see if there's a comparison in nowadays, how there's a shift in a lot of things. Like there's what is it? We're seeing like sharks or other aquatic life closer to shores because basically humans are fucking everything up. Mm-hmm. So I know that's not what happened like 2,000 whatever years ago, but I'd be curious to see if there's any correlation from a major flood to maybe something that we're replicating, and if there is, what's that mean for all of us?
Yeah. We could use a good flood right about now.
Let's shift to one more thing. Something that you gave me permission on is future films, books, or other endovers. I know you got one announcement.
Yes. So I'm very excited. So, and I'll probably be announcing it on social media over the next couple of days. But so right now I have one book on the market, which is Behold the Void. I'm in a bunch of anthologies and stuff like that, but the only book that I have is of my own stuff is Behold the Void, which is a collection of stories. And so I just signed a deal with Lethe Press, Lethe, which is run by a guy named Steve Berman, and we are going to be putting out a new collection in the summer of 2021, and it's going to be called Beneath a Pale Sky. And it'll be a collection of 8 new stories, or I should say, collect 8 stories, 7 of which have been previously published in different, in anthologies or magazines, but one of which will be original to the book. So, and Steve is also going to be taking over as publisher for my current book, Behold the Void. So it'll get currently Behold the Void is published by Lovecraft E-Zine Press. Who are great. Mike's great. Mike Davis is great to work with, but he has sort of a limited distribution function. So Steve is going to take over Behold the Void, and it's going to get more widely distributed to bookstores and libraries, and then also be publishing the new collection Beneath the Pale Sky, and they'll probably be designed in such a way that there'll be sort of a companion set. Behold the Void is going to stay looking exactly like it is right now, but Beneath the Pale Sky will be sort of made to have similar design aspects of it. And then Steve is also going to be reissuing my out of print novella Saculina, which is a horror story about a group of guys on a fishing boat who get slowly methodically attacked by mutant barnacles. So that's a fun read. And so I'll have 3 books out by Lethe Press. My original collection, Behold the Void, Saculina, which is a reissue of a novella that went out of print about a year ago, and then the new book will be Beneath a Pale Sky. So I'm very excited about that.
Sorry about that. Yeah, you got me hooked on the guys getting killed by barnacles. Like, yeah, man, let me read that right now. Right. But seriously, when is the announcement gonna be?
Well, we originally were going to announce it tomorrow, so that may still be the case. It's really up to Steve. being the publisher. So I'm probably going to be, it'll be this week. It'll be either tomorrow, Wednesday, the 17th of June, or the following Thursday or Friday. But originally we talked about it being tomorrow, but that said, as of right now, 8 o'clock, I have not heard from him. So it might be something that we do on Thursday or Friday.
So if I release this episode a week before, which would be this Friday, which I could do if you're okay with that, would I be able to release this Friday without messing anything up for him?
Yes, it's fine. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to release this episode in 3 days then.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, and then you'll be riding right on top of that news that I'll be posting hopefully in the next couple of days. So
that's why I don't want to wait too long for a lot of reasons with that.
Yeah, and it'd be great to push always great to push the fundraiser too. So that's doubly good.
Yeah. So I just had 2 more questions, and I appreciate you giving us your time.
No worries.
For anyone, and kind of a selfish question too, for anyone that has not read a novel by you, or maybe you'll suggest the short story that me and Brennan read in the Midnight Exhibit, what story or novel or novella would you suggest someone reads for the first time by you?
Well, per my comment earlier about how everyone seems to have a different favorite story, it's hard to say, but the only things I have in print right now are Behold the Void, and then there's also a novella called Shiloh, which is Lovecraft-zine published, and which people seem to really, really, really like. So I think you could go, if you just want like one long story, longish story, I would suggest buying Shiloh, which is a story of it takes place during the Civil War about twin brothers who fight for the Confederate army and who get entangled with the Union Army at the Battle of Shiloh. But then supernatural hijinks ensue and it becomes a horror story. That's gotten really strong reviews. And or I would definitely suggest just buying Behold the Void. And then you have my first collection of stories. Get all 9 stories in that book. I think either one of those is a great way to start. The novel, I don't have any novels published. Like I said earlier, there are 3 novels that I have. My agent is currently selling, so I don't foresee any of those hitting, seeing the light of day probably for at least a year. Because even if I were to sell one tomorrow, it would be a year before it would be released. So, so right now, it's the collection, the story collection is probably the best book to focus on.
Okay. And where can people follow you?
I am on Facebook. You can follow me on Facebook. You can follow me on Twitter. Facebook is just Philip Fracassi. Twitter is at Philip Fracassi. And I'm also on Instagram. Same thing. I think it's at P Fracassi on Instagram. You can also go to my website, either pfracassi.com or philipfracassi.com. They both work. And I have links to my social media stuff there as well.
Okay.
And I have a newsletter, as well that you can access through my website as well if you're interested in getting a newsletter every month or 2, very regularly. Oh, and I do also have a Patreon, which you can find, if you go to patreon.com, you can just search my name, and you can join my Patreon if you want to.
That is Philip, Philip, not 2 L's, which is exactly how my son's name is spelled. Best way to do it.
Best way to do it, absolutely.
And your last name, Fracassi, Fracassi.
Yep, correct. Perfect.
Brennan, you got any final questions?
No, I just want to say thank you for your time. We're well over 2 hours now. You've been very generous with it. And, we started off with that whole spiel about putting together the horror writers for Black Lives Matter. I want to say thanks again for just kind of taking that initiative and really bringing a little bit of unity to the entire community and raising an awful lot of money for a very good cause right now.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm very appreciative that the community was so supportive of it, and I hope that they continue to support it. And that's something where we need to make an impact, and we need to make the change needs to happen. And And I just hope that in some small way that, it helps. That's all you can hope for.
And it's reasons like that, and I've seen a few people say this, which is a bummer, but whatever, that the horror community isn't really a community. It's just a gathering of like-minded people, which to me is that's what a community is, isn't it?
Yeah,
Every time there's something bad, we covered this already, so I'm not going to reiterate. We come together, we cheerlead each other. If there's a not so nice person, let's call them a crazy mustache villain. They usually get kicked out or called out, and we go back to talking about scary things. So you are the latest installment as to why, and you highlighted how this is horror is a great thing. People that love it are loving. They do the right thing. We are for Black Lives That Matter. Our statements were made with Todd Keeslin's episode, and we're frankly strongly opposed to anyone that isn't for it, because it's just like Brennan nailed it. You can't be quiet with certain things. It's not right to have people having everything stripped from them, and we're over here just like, fuck it, whatever, it's not affecting us. But you took initiative. So for that, we thank you.
Thanks, man. Thank you.
Absolutely. And thank you for your time, man. I meant it when I said it. Your story hooked me. I plan on reading more by you. And I think it's safe to say, I could speak for Brendan on this part, we hope to have you back here.
Of course, anytime. And you can also, just in case you're an audio fan, I have 2 stories up on Tales to Terrify. You can listen if you want to listen to the stories instead. The Rejects and a story called I can't remember. It's on Tales to Terrify. I can't remember the name of my own stories now. But yeah. So and Behold the Void is also available as an audiobook. So
perfect. Yeah, this has been a great time, man. It felt like a really good episode. It was fun. There were some serious topics that still need to be talked about and hopefully get fixed in our lifetime.
Yeah, for sure.
Keep up the great work, and we'll be in touch.
All right. Thank you.
Have a good night.
Thanks, man.